Hello, everybody. I'm Zenith, and welcome back to the Disney debate. Where Kat, is something wrong?
You said Disney.
Ah! But yeah, guys, welcome back to the Disney debate, where Kat Mac and I talk about Disney products and Disney in general. Today we have one of the biggest flops in Disney history, and that is saying something. Now, this film is worse than The Reluctant Dragon. I'm going to say that right now. And it's not because it's boring in a So Dear to My Heart way. No, this is better than So Dear to My Heart. But this offends so much more than The Reluctant Dragon. It just, It makes me feel unclean to have seen this movie. So welcome, everyone, to Cinderella 2, Electric Boogaloo. Or also known as Dreams Come True.
Yeah, generic title.
And, this is one of those films, one of those Disney films where they actually say the title in the movie. There's like one throwaway line. Oh, my dreams have come true now. Oh, and we have a title.
Yay! You could tell just how creative the creators were of making this. It's like, hey, there's a line in the movie. Let's just make it the title. Kids won't care.
It's one of those films where they said, like 40, 50 years after the fact, let's make a sequel. And this is not a sequel like Bambi 2 was. Bambi 2 is operating very much in the spirit of the original movie. And while it wasn't as good as Bambi was, it was still pretty enjoyable. You know, it wasn't offensive. It didn't do a disservice to its source material. This film is the complete opposite. This is the second Disney sequel we're talking about, and we got off to a really crappy start with these sequels.
That's for damn sure. Yeah, in the case of Cinderella 2, this is basically trying to add more story to an already existing story that ends on and they all lived happily ever after.
And that's the thing, you know, Bambi had a midquel for a sequel. Like, it took place in the middle of the film, and it made sense because there was a time jump. Cinderella was a complete story. It had a complete ending. It didn't need a sequel.
Yeah, but apparently Disney felt otherwise because this thing exists. And honestly, I don't even want to call it a movie, because really, this doesn't follow the movie format.
This is basically, think of it as this. It's a failed TV pilot. It's 3 TV episodes that do not work and are so flawed on every single level, like not just like plot, but just every single level. This is bad.
Yeah, extremely. Like, and the whole plot, just, you know, stringing all the other plots together is just so weak and so childish. It's mind-boggling. Like, you could tell that they're just completely pandering to kids on this level. You know, it's like they don't even care. They're like, oh, we gotta find some way to, you know, tell the continuing story of Cinderella, you know, but let's not just focus on her, let's focus on the mice, let's focus on her stepsister, you know, let's do other stuff that doesn't really involve Cinderella, but, you know, still call it Cinderella.
And that's one of the biggest issues with this, is that this movie is called Cinderella 2, but Cinderella is barely in this.
Yeah, because this is one of those sequels, or I should say episodes, where there are like three separate stories, and they're kind of just strung together with like a barely similar theme. And
It's like a bare bones, like, try to collect this together sort of thing, sort of like Fun and Fancy Free. Only Fun and Fancy Free actually works better than this.
well, I wouldn't say that. I mean,
the basic plot is, okay, after Cinderella 1, we see the fairy godmother is reading the Book of Cinderella to all the mice. And Jock and Gus are apparently late to the book reading session, which is kind of stupid because why do they have to be read the story if they lived it?
Yeah, that was strange.
And so, whatever. So they're late to the book reading, and so they're like, well, why don't we create our own stories of stuff that we've done or that we've witnessed? So the premise is that the mice are making a book of their adventures after Cinderella. And so they come up with, like, these ideas out of their ass. Like, oh, what can we do? Oh, first day in the castle. How about that? And that is, it's basically like how the ideas were created for this film. It's like, how do we come up with an idea? Throw something out to me. Oh, first day in the castle. Anastasia falls in love with someone. Let's do that.
Yeah, and what else? We need a transformation or something. I know. Let's make one of the mice human. That 'cause that always works.
And let's rehash Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo ad nauseum throughout the film.
Like this movie just infuriates on every level. Just how freaking lazy and uncreative it is.
And this is like at the height of the Disney sequel era. This was created in 2002, where they're pumping out Disney sequels like no tomorrow, and this is probably one of the worst. I haven't seen too many of them, but in terms of the stuff that we've witnessed, we saw Bambi 2, and that was good. Then we saw this, so make of that what you will.
Yeah, and this strangely was one of the most this was one of the top-selling animated sequels released on video and DVD that year.
Well, that's because it has the Cinderella name on it.
Yeah, it's like it cost like $5 million to make, and then it managed to gross like
120 million in direct-to-video sales. Whoever bought this film, shame on you. Go sulk in shame because you did not read the reviews.
I guess I'm gonna have to sulk in the corner then. Yeah, I was, this was back in the day, where I just wanted to see, one, where could they go with these possible sequels, and two, how bad could they possibly be? So, yeah, I suffered for some of them.
Yeah, so I only saw this once before today, and I mean, I was a kid, so I didn't realize how bad this was. But when we saw it again, dear God. Let us go part by part, because there's 3 different parts to this, and each is equally frustrating. So it begins with a story of the first day in the castle, a segment called Aim to Please. And so Cinderella is put in charge of the palace, banquet. First of all, the king knows full well that she knows nothing about being a princess. Cinderella is just getting back from her honeymoon, and they're like, okay, let's throw a banquet. And the king goes away with the prince and says, okay, no, Cinderella will be fine. It'll be okay. She knows nothing about being a princess, but she'll do a good job. What the hell?
Yeah, the thing that really infuriates me is the king, because I remember in the first movie how determined he was to be a grandfather at any cost, even going as far as to throw a ball just for the sake of getting his son just to marry someone and pump out some grandkids for him. And in this case, it's never brought up, You know, he's just like, oh, she knows nothing about a princess, but we're going to let her, you know, plan this whole big fancy traditional banquet, even though she has no experience whatsoever. I'm sure she'll do fine. He flip-flops constantly every time you see him.
The thing is, in Cinderella, I can understand his personality. He has a set personality, but no one in the sequel is acting according to their original character. And, you know, it starts with the prince who's all like, oh, she'll be okay. I'm going to go off and party with my son, whatever. So she's left in charge of the banquet. And the first thing we learn is that one of the characters in this segment I absolutely loathe. We find out that the king has one other advisor in addition to the Duke, who we don't see other than like 5 seconds at the beginning. But her name is Prudence. And her catchphrase is, "It simply isn't done." Which is right. She's worse than the Reluctant Dragon in terms of character, in terms of someone who's simply too hoity-toity for everything around her.
Yeah, she's a complete traditionalist. She's stuck in her old ways. You know, she's totally stuck up. She expects, you know, everything to go perfectly. Like, she's just a really despicable character.
And so she, along with two of the other servants in the castle, are leading Cinderella through the banquet. And they keep asking her, oh, do you want braised or boiled chicken? Do you want this or that? Do you want cream or white or like off-white? Or they have like a bunch of similarly, cream or eggshell colored napkins. And like, what does it even matter? But before Cinderella can even answer, Prudence is just like answering for her. And I'm like, she never gives Cinderella the opportunity to make a decision for herself. She's supposed to be planning the banquet, not Prudence. If, you know, they could have given the responsibility of the banquet to Prudence and nothing would have been lost.
Yeah,
Seriously,
they should have just done that. Just, you know, left Prudence in charge. You know, either had Cinderella do her own project or, you know, brought her along with them to wherever it is they went, you know. Because, you know, like, all the woman does throughout the whole story is, you know, bitch about, you know, how this isn't how we do things. This is how it's supposed to be done. You're not doing it right.
Then let Prudence do it. But okay, so the point of the story is that Cinderella has to learn to be this princess or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, like, she's bombarded with these questions. Prudence keeps saying, oh no, this is the way it's done. You can't open the curtains in the castle. It simply isn't done. And throughout the entire montage at the beginning, she's bombarded with all the other servants asking her questions. Like, they don't let her answer at all.
Yeah, it's very frustrating to watch, because, you know, any normal person at that point would just be like, you know what, fuck this shit, you do it yourself. And honestly, I'm surprised that, you know, like, Cinderella didn't, like, exercise her new power and just say, like, okay, here's the thing, I'm the princess. You know, that means I'm above you, which means you, a servant, have to do what I say. You know?
But no, period. You know, she despairs that, oh, maybe I'm not cut out for this princess thing, which is completely not in her character. She's not that type of person. The only time in Cinderella where she ever gave up was when all hope seemed lost and she was locked in her tower. But then she got hope again once she saw the mice bring the key. But, I mean, there was nothing she could do at that point. And here, she's the freaking princess. She can do whatever she sets her minds to. You know, according to Prudence, like, commoners can't be put in the castle. You know, it simply isn't done. You know, she can be like, no, Prudence, these are my friends. Let's bring them in the castle.
Yeah, go ahead.
It leads to plot holes, too, because, you know, at one point during the montage, there are people outside the gate. They're commoners. She says commoners aren't allowed to be brought into the castle. First of all, what about during the last banquet? You know, the one that Cinderella attended? The one that, you know, every eligible maiden was allowed to go into? Or how about Cinderella herself, who is a commoner? You know, she isn't royalty at all. But leaving that aside, Cinderella answers and she says, "These are my friends." Okay. One, she had never shown, other than the mice in the castle and the animals, that she had a friend in Cinderella. Never. That was the whole point. She was alienated and ostracized in her own home, and you never saw anyone else other than the sisters.
Exactly.
Never.
Yeah, and second, if she did have friends, why didn't they ever, try to help her? Why were they never aware of the fact that she was being enslaved and abused by her stepfamily and done something about it? I mean, I know this is back in the day, before rules like that existed and everything, but still, come on.
I mean, you could do something about it if they truly were friends, but they weren't because we never saw them in the original movie. So right off the bat, this one portion of this movie is so infuriating because it doesn't get simple continuity right. Mm-hmm. But, okay, Cinderella gets her inspiration. She's like, no, I can't be a princess. I just gotta change the way I do things. And so she goes around inviting all the commoners to the banquet, and she makes chocolate pudding for dessert instead of prunes, because that's the way they roll in the castle, apparently. And she opens the curtains so the vampire Prudence gets all pissed off. And she's like, "It simply isn't done. This does not agree with me."
And Cinderella's all like, "Revolution!"
And I'm just like, though, some of these problems are very simple. Why aren't they opening the curtains in the castle in the first place? People need to see.
Yeah, not to mention, if you look at the castle in the first movie, not only is it huge, bigger than it's portrayed in this movie, but you see the windows and everything. A lot of them don't even have windows. It's very open, and it makes it very large. And there's no trace of a curtain anywhere, and it's baffling, that they would actually keep them closed like that.
It simply isn't done. Why? Explain, movie. You got to explain, otherwise we don't understand.
Right. I mean, how do they see? Do they just keep the fire running 24/7?
Because, I mean, I don't know if electricity was invented, or is it all candlelight or something like that?
That leads to another inconsistency, is the date when this takes place. Well, let's say for sake of simplicity, everything takes place before electricity was invented. All right, since people use candles and everything to light their way around. And let's say this takes place in France. I mean, why would you keep an entire castle dark?
Because they're vampires, apparently.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's all these little things that don't make sense that Prudence says, "Oh, it's tradition. It simply isn't done this way." But we're never given any reason for why this is tradition, why there's prunes for dessert, even though it appears that the king doesn't like prunes at the end of the film, or at the end of the portion of the film. But we'll get to that in a second. But anyway, so there's a montage of Cinderella going around, changing everything. She makes chocolate pudding. She invites all the commoners to the banquet. And she has the curtains opened, and she starts everyone dancing. And the king comes back. And Prudence was like, "This isn't the way I wanted it to be. I mean, seriously, it simply isn't done." And the king takes one look around, and he starts to get outraged, but then stops, because every second he's like, oh, he finds something to enjoy. He's like a cat with a toy. He sees the curtains are opened, like, "What? The curtains are opened?" And then he looks outside and he's like, "Oh, that's a beautiful moon." And then he's like, "What? Commoners in the main hall? Oh, hey, Hugh." First of all, if commoners are never allowed in the castle, or the king never interacts with commoners, how does he have a friend? How does he have a friend that he knows? He treats this person like he knows him very well.
Right.
And then chocolate pudding gets dumped on his head, and it's like, what? No prunes? And then he eats it, and it's like, ooh, I love chocolate, my favorite. This is the most easily changeable person in the history of media.
Yeah, basically, it's like in So Dear to My Heart, where problems occur but then are quickly resolved. So
there is no problem.
Yeah, so this...
It's like the plot convenience fairy dropped in.
Yes, it's basically this, a TV pilot, something really bad happens, but then in like less than 20 minutes it's resolved.
So basically that is the first short or the first episode of this movie, and it is completely infuriating on pretty much every level. We have this plot that it relies on all the characters not acting according to their character. We have the king going away with the prince because, he wants to be with his son for some reason, while making Cinderella, instead of Prudence, do all the work. And it's like the creators were trying to put Cinderella back into the role of, a servant.
Pretty much. I mean, Prudence is pretty much like her stepmom. I mean, she's back in the, the servant role where everybody's telling her what to do.
And the thing is, like, she doesn't have the charm or the menace that Lady Tremaine had. With Prudence, all she is infuriating. She's annoying beyond all belief. And, she is the new reluctant dragon. Whenever something comes up, it's Prudence's fault now. And then we have this montage of all the stuff that isn't done in the castle, and yet it makes no sense, and then it's resolved in 5 minutes. Like, this is like barely even... It's not even on the lazy level. It's just like, they didn't even try. It's not them being lazy, because being lazy, you can come up with stuff better than this. I could come up with something better than this in my sleep.
This sounds like sort of like a fanfic when you think about it. What teenage girls, how they see authority figures, just making rules for the sake of making rules and, making things as boring and traditional as possible. And then they step in and revolutionize everything with their hip new ways. That's what it sort of seems like.
It's horrible. And like I said, no one's acting in character. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is that none of these voice actors sound remotely anything like the original voice actors. Now, I know taking place in 2002, they probably couldn't get the original voice actors, but at least try. Try to make them sound like the original. They did that in Bambi too. I mean, a lot of the characters sounded different, but they sounded similar to their original counterparts.
So that's the first part. The
first episode in this failed TV pilot that was Cinderella 2. The next segment is called Tall Tale, where it segues from like Jock saying, "Oh, I don't like this magic stuff," because they were using magic to help them make the storybook. And he's like, "Oh, we're not going to get into that magic stuff again. Remember what happened last time." And so he goes into the story of how he feels in the story that he is too small to help Cinderella now that she's in the palace and she has all the servants helping her. Even though in the first movie, the whole thing about the mice was they were helping Cinderella in return for her kindness. Now that she is not, in a situation where she really needs help, I mean, they don't actually really need to help her. But that doesn't mean they can't.
Yeah, I think at this point, the mice become so used to, like, helping her out and stuff that now that, everything's good for her, they're just plain bored with their lives. Like, they have nothing better to do with themselves, other than, mouse stuff, eat, sleep, all that stuff. So. And
this episode also introduces a new nemesis for the mice. Instead of Lucifer, it's a snobby cat who is fat beyond all belief. Yeah, this is the fattest pamperedest cat you've ever seen.
And her name's Pom Pom.
Yeah, and she's like the frou-frou kitty cat. And she barely has any charisma. Like, Lucifer, you enjoyed watching Chase the Mice because, you know, Lucifer was crazed. Like, if you ever looked into its eyes, it was always, like, spiraling when he was chasing them. That was a crazy cat.
Yeah, because with Lucifer, you could always, you know, he was so expressive, and you could always believe him. Like, you look at him, he could be goofy one minute, he could be scary the next, and it's always fun just to see, you know, his emotional range and how he reacts to everything around him. In the case of Pom Pom, it's just, you know, a typical cat trying to catch a mouse.
And so frou-frou beyond belief. Like, this is the snobbish cat. She rivals Prudence in terms of how snobby she is.
Yeah, and of course, like her main role is just that, you know, I'm gonna catch these mice for no other reason than I'm bored. You know, pretty much this whole middle plot exists because all the characters are bored and don't know what to do with themselves.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, Jock is like, oh, I'm going to do something nice for Cinderella because, you know, that's the only thing I'm good at right now, whatever. He has some flawed reasoning. So he goes into the flower garden and he picks out some flowers from her. And it's here that we see a lot of the inconsistencies with the animation. This animation is basically the equivalent of a bad TV show. Like, think the Little Mermaid TV show in terms of how the animation is.
Yeah,
like,
or Aladdin, the TV show.
Mm-hmm. Well, at least Aladdin, the TV show, wasn't suck, so most of the time. But yeah, so we see that they have these flowers in this garden that they're picking up, and the flowers are like 3 times their size. As soon as they pick the flower, it's as big as they are.
Yeah.
Like, it's exactly their size. And I'm just like, okay, animators, you did a bad job there.
Yeah, this is, like The Reluctant Dragon, there's a lot of incontinuity in terms of the art. It's just all over the place at times. Like, I've seen people's hair color change. I've seen their expressions change, their mouths moving or not moving when they're talking. It's infuriating.
I mean, it's not horrible. It's not as bad as The Reluctant Dragon in terms of animation. That was just kind of weird.
Right.
But this is somewhat lazy. And so we see the pom-pom cat looks into the garden and sees the one flower that is moving, and she immediately thinks, "Oh, there's the mice." What kind of logic is that?
Board logic.
It's like the plot convenience fairy just keeps wanting to crop up here.
And speaking of fairies, Fairy Godmother makes an appearance. Because, like all the other characters in this segment, she herself is also bored and overhears Jock talking about how things would be better off if he were bigger. So, of course, you know, because he has to learn a lesson, she grants his wish and turns him into a human.
And now, the strangest thing about this is that, like, Pom Pom is chasing him while he's in mice form, and then he sees the fairy godmother and makes his wish. And before I get into that part, first of all, the fairy godmother responds to his wish immediately. In that case, why did she not come to Cinderella's aid
Sooner?
Yeah, it just, like, it raises further plot inconsistencies with the first film. But anyway, so he changes into a human, and Pom Pom sees this and still decides to chase him. She uses this logic where the size of one mice, and she adds up the size of him, and she's like, that's basically 5 mice. Because apparently the scale of 5 mice standing on top of each other is equal to that of a human.
Yay,
go figure.
Physics. Yeah.
But anyway, so Pom Pom continues to chase him in human form.
And he still, still having like mouse habits and everything, instinctively runs from her. And, he does try to fight back at one point, but he's never given the real proper opportunity to, so he keeps, like, letting her, like, bully him around. And it's infuriating to watch. It's like, dude, if I were a mouse and I suddenly grew bigger than the cat, I'd fucking bitch slap that thing. Stomp it to the ground.
I'd be like, please, come on. You're a cat. What can you do to me? But, so, this is just utterly pointless in terms of story. But, so, as a human, Jacques is like going to tell Cinderella that, oh, he's Jacques and that he, has grown big and he can help her now. However, before he can even tell Cinderella, he's bombarded by both Cinderella and the Duke, all asking him questions one after another, not even letting him talk. Like, it's like the very first episode of this movie where, they don't let him get a word in edgewise. And I'm just like, is everyone a dick in this castle?
Pretty much. There's also another running joke throughout this where, through some confusion, the Duke thinks that Jacques' name is Sir Hugh. Mm-hmm. So like a lot of people, he's thinking, oh, okay, what nationality is that name? And he keeps coming up with different things, and
like Dutch and whatever and stuff like that.
Right, and then he finally ends it on, and then finally Jacques' like, oh, yeah, it's French. And so he's like, oh yeah, French, I should have known. And I'm thinking, wait a sec, doesn't the story of Cinderella take place in France? So you don't understand your own language?
Apparently not, because, Cinderella too cannot grasp France. Or French of all things, Mm. So we have Jacques going around trying and failing to help Cinderella. Like, there's a bunch of, like, failed, like, small plot points where he's, like, trying to help her out and completely fails because the cat interrupts him or some stupid thing like that. And then he starts getting lonely, so he goes and he sees the mice in their hole, and he immediately thinks, oh, let's go talk to them. So he sticks his head into the mouse hole and frightens the hell out of them, saying, hey, I'm Jacques. And so the mice run away. Now, as he's about to leave, he says something, he's talking to the Duke, and he says something like zug zug. I don't know exactly what it means in mice speak, but they say it a lot in the original film. And so the woman mouse that you see, like, throughout most of Cinderella, she takes one look at him and she's like, Jacques? And I'm like, what kind of leap in logic is that?
I guess she figured, like, because he's probably the only person she ever heard, actually say that phrase. So she probably thinks that either A, he must have heard it from Jacques, talk to him, or B, it probably is him.
But the thing is, in the original Cinderella, there was kind of a similar leap of logic by Lady Tremaine when she found that she figured out that Cinderella was at the ball. Now, that makes so much more sense than this, and I'm going to tell you why. In the original, Cinderella only changed appearance, and throughout the entire ball, Lady Tremaine and Anastasia and Drizella thought they recognized her from somewhere before. And while Lady Tremaine doesn't know how she got those clothes or that dress or whatever, she could recognize that, and she saw something different happening with Cinderella, so she made a very well-placed leap in logic, where she, it made sense. Here, I don't get it. Like, a mouse takes one look at a human saying zug zug and says, oh, that's Jacques. She has no idea that the transformation has taken place. No one other than the fairy godmother knows that he had been transformed. How does she see through him? Because he looks nothing like he does in mouse form. It's not like the only similar thing that he's doing is saying a certain phrase.
I guess that sometimes that's just enough. I mean, who knows? I mean, you know, in a lot of movies where transformations take place, usually the way that the character makes another character who knows them very well, like, recognize them is either by doing a certain gesture or saying a certain phrase that only they would know.
I guess. I think it's so much of a leap in logic as to be, like, completely out of left field sometimes.
I guess. But basically, long story short, it gets to a point where Jock just, you know, doesn't want to be a mouse anymore, and at that point, there's an accident, and the king gets stuck on a rampaging elephant that goes through the carnival that's going on, and Jock wants to stop. Jock wants to, you know, help, but he doesn't know how. Then cue Fairy Deus Ex Machina shows up and is like, okay, I think you learned your lesson, so obviously, you know, there's only one way you can help. You know, I'm going to turn you back into a mouse, but that's your decision on whether you want that to happen or not. And of course he says yes. And of course he gets turned back into a mouse, he manages to stop the elephant, and everybody lives happily ever after.
And it's just like the one thing, the one problem that a mouse could solve was to stop a rampaging elephant. It's infuriating because the whole message is supposed to be, oh, be happy with who you are because you can do great things. He's a mouse. He has proven in the original movie already that he can do amazing things. He and Gus lifted that heavy key all the way to the top of the tower. Yeah. This is shoehorning this plot point in that, oh, he feels insignificant for some reason, and so the one thing that a mouse could possibly stop in this context, he's able to. It doesn't solve the issue at hand that he feels inadequate because he was supposed to be helping Cinderella, and he doesn't do that in the end. He just helps save the king.
And the thing that, you know, that kind of infuriated me is how the fairy godmother reacts in that whole situation. I mean, there is a rampaging elephant going throughout the carnival, you know, endangering the lives of people and destroying public property. Yet instead of, you know, lifting her wand and stopping it, she decides, oh, I'm going to take this opportunity and, you know, teach the mouse a lesson. I mean, what a thoughtless bitch. Seriously.
Yeah, like, no one is acting in character, as I said before.
And another nitpick that I wanted to bring up, like I mentioned in the first one, you know, the time period that this takes place in is kind of, you know, ambiguous, I guess, but I assume it took place before electricity. Well, this segment kind of counteracts that because, like I said, there's a carnival going on, and there's actually electric lights. And
that's the only sign of electricity that we ever see in the film, but these lights out of nowhere. And I'm just like, okay, when in the hell are we? Are we in Naruto times or something like that? Like, it's just a weird time continuity.
Yeah, there's... everything is just so confusing and so all over the place. It's...
The problem with a lot of these shorts is not that the plot itself is bad per se, because, you know, it's not a good plot, but it could work on its own. But the guys who created this could not stick with a single, like, plot point. They couldn't stick with a single message and go with it. They had to try several different things and not commit to it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This just rage.
There's nothing enjoyable about any of these segments, but besides the occasional line from Gus. But Gus makes everything better.
Right, and let's not forget the transitions in between these, because it's bad enough that they made the whole, you know, paper-thin plot of, you know, the mice make a storybook for Cinderella as the basis for telling these stories, but their transition between stories it's just terrible, because I mean, the first one they did to transition to Jock's story was, I guess, okay because it showed, Jock's dislike for magic because of, the situation that it put him in previously. But then,
but guess, like, the next transition, guess what? They use magic.
yeah, one of the mice decides, hey, this isn't going fast enough, let's use magic, so he gets some of the, sparkly dust and brings all of the drawing implements to life, and of course they go haywire, and,
It's basically, it's a huge ripoff of Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Oh, extremely. And, of course, there's, reused animation galore, but then, here's the thing, like, everything is, like, going to crap. Fairy Godmother stops it. Everyone's like, oh, this is such a huge mess. By the way, remember when Anastasia fell in love?
Like, what the hell? Like, oh, it's not as big a mess as when Anastasia fell in love. And I'm like, what? What kind of transition was that?
Yeah, that made no sense. I mean, there is a point in that segment where, there is, like, a big mess happening, but seriously, that's like the first thing you think of?
Really, yeah. Oh, yeah, you being covered in paint supplies. That reminds me of Anastasia. Okay.
And speaking of which, that's the last segment in the so-called movie. It's called
oh, go ahead, sorry.
And it's called An Uncommon Romance, and this features Cinderella's stepsister Anastasia and how she meets a baker in town and falls in love with him.
And the thing in this story is that Anastasia, as the character, her design, is basically ripped from Ariel's design.
Right. That's later on, because after, meeting the baker and everything, and having her mother tell her that she can't see him because he's beneath her, and, she doesn't want her daughter involved with a commoner, even though they are commoners, and they're probably not...
We'll get into that in a minute.
Right. Cinderella, who, despite the years of abuse and, and servitude, decides...
I'll get into that in a minute.
Right. decides to help out Anastasia by giving her a makeover. So she gets a new dress, she gets her hair redone and everything, and when she's done, aside from the face, she looks exactly like Ariel.
Yeah, there's so much reused Little Mermaid animation in this. I'm like, what is even the hell here?
They should have just, made this a crossover where Ariel meets up with Cinderella. Now that would have been interesting to see.
That would have at least been interesting and not infuriating. But anyway, let's get back to the premise at hand. Okay, so this is the one story that doesn't really begin from the perspective of the mice. And it calls into question the entire structure of this, because how do the mice know what's happening in Lady Tremaine's household? Because they're not there. They're the ones telling the story. How do they know what's going on?
Narrator's privilege, I guess.
Whatever, like, technical issues aside, it starts off with Lady Tremaine and Anastasia and Drizella, and Lady Tremaine's just like, now, you girls, you have failed me once before. I hate you, by the way. And she's like, all right, come on, we're going to go find you husbands, at least rich, dukish husbands, and you're not going to fail me. And so they go out into the world. They go out and they try to find someone suitable for the women. And in a bakery, Anastasia falls in love. But Lady Tremaine doesn't approve because he's a baker. Now, putting aside the fact that Lady Tremaine doesn't have too much money left, probably, after Cinderella took away her dowry, because I'm assuming the king sorted that out already. But putting that fact aside, at that time, bakers were not that common folk. Bakers made the bread for everyone. You can imagine that they were pretty wealthy.
Right, and if the play The Baker's Wife taught us anything, it's that some towns rely on having a good baker in order to run properly.
And the thing is, wouldn't she be happy in the fact that her daughter is actually getting in love with anyone at all? Because up until this point, we've had no inclination that anyone has expressed any interest in Anastasia or Drizella. They're very common looking, and I get the impression that they don't have many suitors. Just take it. Whatever money you can get out of him.
Well, also keep in mind that Lady Tremaine has this false sense of, what's that word?
Status?
Right. Lady Tremaine has this false sense of status, where she thinks that, we may not be as well off as, a duke or a marquis or anything like that, but we're still a lot better than those filthy commoners. And I guess, the only way to really prove that is by marrying off her daughters to them. Plus, as mentioned in the first film, they live in a crumbling chateau, and they also pretty much squandered all of their inheritance from Cinderella's father. So, first of all, they're barely, well off as it is. So, she wants to get the most she can possibly out of her daughters, even if, it's quite obvious that they won't be able to do any better.
Yeah, I just think that, at the time, when bakers were making a lot of money, she would think, okay, well, this is probably, better than nothing, so let's, get some money out of this. I don't know. It just seems like really stupid for her to do that.
It's just her being a stuck-up bitch, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's still harboring under the delusion that, hey, I know somewhere that some rich prince or whatever is going to come and, take my daughters away, and then I'll live comfortably the rest of my life. It's all a delusion for her, I believe.
But anyway, so we see that she falls in love with this baker, and she goes off and she's like, oh, he'll never fall in love with me, because she tries to court him, and then she accidentally gets, a face full of a whole bunch of bread and eggs and whatnot. And so Cinderella finds her crying, and she's like, she agrees to help Anastasia find her true love. This is the worst thing in this movie in terms of continuity. Why in the freaking hell would Cinderella agree to help someone who had abused her for years? I can understand that she's kind of a messianic character and is very forgiving, but seriously,
it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because I know that if I had a stepsister that was that horrible to me for, at least 10 years, possibly, and, and then suddenly, she gets her comeuppance with, oh, well, now you can't, be with the one you love? Tough shit. I mean, it's... I know Cinderella's supposed to be all good and nice and everything, but come on, you have to take some solace, some sort of, enjoyment out of seeing the people who tortured you for so long, get what's coming to them.
And so despite the years of torture and abuse, Cinderella gives her a makeover. And at the same time, the mice make a deal with Lucifer.
Yes, because Lucifer's in this too.
Mm-hmm. Apparently he didn't die at the end of the first film. I thought that was implied. But...
yeah.
So the Disney death count is not going up. But...
and we finally find out why Pom Pom was added to this movie.
As a cheap love interest for Lucifer, and so the mice make a deal with Lucifer, a literal deal with the devil. So they say, if you'll stop chasing mice, we'll help her fall in love with you. And they take his word. His name is Lucifer. You can't trust him. He's a cat. He's gonna chase you anyway.
Yeah, and not only that, but their first couple of tries trying to, make him look suitable were absolutely atrocious. 'Cause, I mean, Pom Pom is supposed to be like a sort of aristocrat. And so you think they'd make him look like an aristocrat too. But the first time they make him over, he looks like one of those
clown. Like he has a blue afro and clown nose and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'm like, what?
Yeah, he looks
Pumpkin, what?
Yeah,
Afro, what?
Yeah, he looks like a clown. He looks like a Jamaican dude with dreads. And it's like...
Like, why would you dress up the cat as a Jamaican? This does not make sense. This is the animators giving up.
This is just like, okay, let's throw some cheap laughs in there. And it doesn't work. So, anyway, both Lucifer and Anastasia get their makeovers. What was it?
In Anastasia, there's another sub-conflict. There's like two sub-conflicts in this film with Anastasia. And there's a misunderstanding where when she's about to give him flowers, and he gets flowers for her, but he's with another woman, discussing how good the flowers look. And she's holding the flowers and he's holding the flowers, and so there's a misunderstanding. Woo! And so she runs away crying, and he sees this, and he goes over to her, and he gives her the flowers, and it's suddenly all better. Like, it's the conflict in this film is over in 5 seconds, and then the other sub-conflicts comes up where Lady Tremaine and Drizella appear all of a sudden, and they see her with the baker, and they're like, oh, nope, we can't have that. But because of the confidence that Cinderella gives her, for reasons I don't understand, she stands up to Lady Tremaine, and all is happy, and so she lives happily ever after with the baker.
I say, fuck you, Mom, I do what I want.
And then, with the other subplot of the cat, Pom Pom agrees to court Lucifer, and so they make a deal, and they both start attacking the mice. Because, when you make a deal with Lucifer, he's got to break his promise. And so, because the cat is beaten by the mice, Pom Pom runs away. She like treats him with disdain or something like that.
Yeah, because apparently she gets her pretty makeup, because apparently cats wear makeup in this movie, all ruined, and she instead of taking her frustration out on the mice, she takes it out on Lucifer instead, and then promptly breaks up with him. So he doesn't get her, the mice...
It's just like none of these sequences make sense.
Right, and nothing of value was lost.
And another thing that keeps happening in this film that I didn't bring up before, they keep giving cats baths in this. And I can understand in the first film because Lucifer was given a bath because Lady Tremaine wanted him to look prim and proper. But cats give themselves baths. And in this, they give they give Pom Pom and Lucifer not one but 2 baths to make them look presentable when cats clean themselves. It's not like, it's not Lady Tremaine doing it because she wants everything to be prim and proper. It's them trying to dress him up. And I'm just like, why?
I mean, I know cats can be groomed, and in the case of some cats, they can't groom themselves, so it is, more practical to give them baths. But for the most part, as a cat owner, I would never give my cat a bath, because
they're not going to like
unless
it.
I want to be on the other end of the claw.
The only reason why it exists is a callback to the first movie, which brings up the other horrible thought that these creators have seen the original film and just don't give a shit.
Pretty much.
So that is the end of the third feature. And looking at all of these features, all of them are infuriating. None of them make sense. There are a bazillion plot holes. And none of these characters are either acting according to the original characteristics of their character, or are likable. None of these guys are likable.
No, and even because, in my opinion, the strongest out of all of them is the story about Anastasia falling in love, and they try to make her more sympathetic and go towards being more of a good guy.
But at the same time, she never apologizes to Cinderella. She never thanks her. She just asks, "Why are you doing this?" And Cinderella never gives a good answer. And I'm just like, guys, she tortured and abused Cinderella for years. No way this is feasible.
Yeah.
But
yeah, this whole movie is just one big horrible mess.
It's what the hell.
Yeah.
And you know what's even worse about it? The music. I said before that Cinderella was a revolution, and it was a revelation for the Disney company in terms of music, because every single song worked and was brought forth to move forward the plot. This is the complete opposite. There are 3 major songs in this film, other than Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, which is repeated ad nauseum for no reason at all. And it's like, it's in 3 of the stories, and it's repeated at the end of the film. But the original songs created for this film are simply horrible.
Yeah, they're basically pop songs, but they are sung horribly off key, and
the person who performed this was Brooke Allison, and the thing is, she doesn't have the chops to sing the song, and so she tries her hardest to oversing it, and as such, it's grating towards the ears, and she's unintelligible. I can't hear the words that are said in the song.
Yeah, so the 3 songs, they're all very generic titles. The first one is When You Follow Your Heart, which was in the story when Cinderella's first day in the castle, and it's basically a montage song for how she revolutionizes the way that the banquet is being held, and that hurt my ears because she just kept going higher and higher and higher, and I'm like, shut the fuck up!
Like, you can't sing these big notes. Diana Ross, you are not. Whitney Houston, you are not.
No, not at all. And then the second song is It's Gonna Be a Beautiful Day, or something like that. And this isn't a transition or anything. This is just after Jacques becomes human and he's walking from the garden to where the carnival is being held. It's just that, and it's like,
it's padding.
Pretty much. There's no purpose in it being there. It's just like traveling music. And it's not entertaining in the least. And then the last song is was it What's Inside That Counts? And this is during the montage when Anastasia and Lucifer are both getting makeovers.
And it completely misses the point. Oh, it's What's Inside That Counts. They're getting a makeover.
Yeah.
That's missing the point completely. And another thing about this entire mess that's infuriating, not more so than even the songs, more so than the constant continuity issues and the infuriatingness of everything else, there were 2 editors on this. Specific continuity editors.
Yeah, great job, guys. You bat 1,000 with this one.
Seriously, we didn't look at the credits of some of these other films, but I was specifically looking at this to just get angry at people. And then I saw that there were not 1, but 2 continuity editors. What the hell?
Obviously, these people never watched the original. Otherwise, they would have scrapped this entire film.
That is a fail. Fail. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Yeah, so overall, Terrible, terrible movie, terrible, unnecessary, lazy sequel, a definite skip. And
This is one of these that I would not recommend even to hardcore Disney fans. Like, this is the worst Disney sequel that I have ever seen, and while I haven't seen that many, it is really horrible. And in terms of the stuff that we talked about in the show, it's the worst out of the two. And we've kind of had the best Disney sequel and the worst Disney sequel right after each other.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if it's worse than Fox and the Hound too, but
I haven't seen that yet, but
but we will get to that. But good news though. The next movie we're reviewing is Cinderella 3, and
apparently it doesn't suck.
And the good thing about this is that you don't need to watch the second movie at all in order to get what's happening in the third one. In fact,
oh, hells yes.
In fact, the third movie does the very rare job, and a wonderful job at that, at pretty much erasing any trace that the second movie ever happened.
Yay, retcons!
Yes. So this entire movie, pointless. Forgettable.
This movie doesn't exist. It's like The Lion King 1.5.
Well, that technically still exists, but
damn you.
In continuity. But in this, Cinderella 2, in continuity, does not exist.
It is a black mark on Disney's record, and it will not... It is not real.
Right. But we will discuss all of that in the next episode. We review Cinderella 3. And
also known as Back to the Future Part 3.
Yes, Cinderella 3, A Twist in Time. And trust me, after the shit stain that we've had to watch with this one, it gets better.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, guys, that has been the Disney debate for today. If you have any comments, concerns, criticisms, or suggestions for Disney movies that are distributed by Disney but, don't show up on the main theatrical releases, please let us know at zenithrule.blip.tv in the comments thread. Or if you don't want to do that, you can always follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/zenithrule and twitter.com/EphraimTRabbit. Or if you think Twitter is for squares, also like pants, you can follow us at facebook.com/zenithrule and facebook.com/catmac. And you can check out our Disney Debate fan page at facebook.com/thedisneydebate. And, you can find all our episodes up there and, just chat with us about what you think of the show. But next time we will be talking about Cinderella 3, Twist in Time, and hopefully things will be better than today, where I got angrier than I have been in a while.
That's saying something.
Reluctant Dragon, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to be worse than this, but no.
In the meantime, I am Kat Mac /EphraimTRabbit/CatTCritic.
And I am Zenith Rule, and we will be seeing you guys
next time.
TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
Hey, that's my line.
Thank you for watching The Media Meltdown. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. And if you like what you see, show your support on the Patreon page at patreon.com/Media Meltdown. See you all next time on The Media Meltdown.